Good morning. My name is John Von Paris, and I am the chairman of the MDTA Finance and Administration Committee. I hereby call the meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee to order at 9 a.m. In accordance with the live streaming law, this meeting is being conducted via video conference and is being live streamed on the MDTA Finance Committee webpage. All members will have their video active during the entirety of the meeting. To minimize background noise during the call, I would ask that everyone on the line please mute your phones except when speaking. I ask that those who are presenting to or answering a question to please turn your video and audio on when speaking. When you're done, please turn your video off and put your audio on mute. There are no members of the public, no elected officials, and no media who have pre-registered to comment at this morning's meeting. At this time, we will begin with agenda item number 1, the approval of the minutes from June 18th, 2024, the open meeting minutes. Has everyone received a copy? Are there any questions, or is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Member Ardinger, I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed. Motion carries. The minutes are approved. We will move on to agenda item number 2, MDTA Resolution 24-04, continuity of operations. Richard, are you here?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Members,
Richard,
thank you. How are you? The
Good.
purpose of this memorandum is to seek the Maryland Transportation Authority Finance Committee's approval on MDTA Resolution 2404 Delegated Authority for the Continuity of Operations Plan, or the COOP Plan. Some key takeaways is this COOP Plan develops, implements, and maintains a viable continuity of operations for the MDTA. The COOP plan has components supporting elements that are annually reviewed, evaluated, and revised as necessary, and certified annually based on the requirements of the Maryland Annotated Code Public Safety Article Title 14, Section 116. MDTA Resolution 1704, Continuity of Operations, was approved by the MDTA Board back in on July 27th of 2017. The purpose of this resolution 2404 is to update various job positions in the resolution by removing the deputy executive director position and adding the chief engineer to the resolution. So again, this is simply an update to an existing plan that has been in effect for several years with the agency. The change and update on this plan is only again removing the deputy executive director and adding the chief engineer due to the organizational structure, which is different today as it was in 2017. So that's a little bit about the COOP. This resolution delegates authority to conduct such government functions and approvals to the executive director in accordance with certain terms and conditions, and authorizes the executive director, or during the absence or inability of the executive director, that the executive director may designate the chief of operations, chief administrative officer, chief financial officer, chief engineer, or chief of police, each as an authorized officer to discharge or direct the discharge of the executive function of MDTA staff and employees, and to perform the necessary activities of the MDTA, including the operations and maintenance of its projects during all weather conditions, traffic, accidents, and other emergencies, both major and minor, on behalf of the MDTA in exercising the foregoing authority. The authorized officer is hereby authorized to take such actions as may be required to continue the business operations of MDTA. This is a COOP, a continuity of operations plan that has been in place again for years and years with the MDTA. The only update is due to the organizational structure, which is different from today as it was in 2017. I'll take any questions.
Okay. Any questions? Member Artinger? I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Good morning,
you.
Richard.
Good morning, member.
Definitely needed. We just had a real example of how this would be needed. I just want to understand, and I think you explained this, but I want to make sure I understand how this works. This is not board ceding any of our authority. It's only, so any decision that would be a board decision is not impacted by this resolution. Is that correct?
That is correct, Member Artinger. This is essentially anything that would happen with the board. Nothing supersedes that. This is just, in other words, in this instance, let's take the instance that just occurred, where Bruce was contacting the board. It would be the delegated individual or authority or officer that would be contacting the board to make the necessary actions or decisions or meetings. So it's just continuing the operations to have a head in place to be able to continue the operations and give the board the full autonomy to do their necessary actions.
Okay, so just throwing out an example, let's just say that there's some kind of decision that would require board approval. And we've got an emergency situation. How does that work? What would happen then? And does this resolution mean anything?
So it doesn't. All the operating policy and all existing policies that are currently in place, all actions that are currently that would be handled by the executive director, including contacting the board for any emergency meetings or whatever, would still be in play. It's just a matter of the individual that's actually carrying it out.
Okay, perfect. And so that makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good question. Any other questions? I do have a comment or a question. I guess this came about today, but we've had these changes in place for quite a while. Should we do anything different in the future as it relates to that? For example, I mean, like
restate your question.
The change of not having, for example, a deputy executive director. Would that, in the future, if we the way it's structured now, if we didn't have a specific job title or it was changed, would we revisit that at the time of making the change, or would we?
We would revisit it annually. So whenever that change would occur, it would be an annual revision. At that point, we would capture that, notate that, document that, and then bring it to the board.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I do have one question related to this. So aside from the changing of titles since this was originally introduced, and you said it's reviewed yearly, does this mean that the current leadership team has signed off on the rest of the entirety of the continuity plan aside from just what happens with the executive director?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And when there's a review. Is the review of the entire, all of the policy that, that flows with this? Is that, or
Yes, sir.
specific?
The entirety of the document, the COOP plan, is reviewed in its entirety as it impacts the agency as a whole.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Member Carroll?
Member Von Paris, just to piggyback on your question, I think I'm asking the same question, but maybe a different way, but I'll still ask. Richard, did what we're doing here prompt a review of any other aspects of operations or plans that need to be updated or reviewed or revised based on just, time passing and or, a contemporaneous look at how or view of how we might look at operating? Are there any other things that need to be addressed outside of what this document is pertaining to that we might want to look at as well?
Well, I guess I would simply, and I don't want to speak for Bruce because I see Bruce is on, but there's a continuing evaluation of all operations of the organization by the executive director. So I will pass that over to Bruce.
Thank you, Richard. Good morning, everybody. I'd just say that one thing that we've dug into recently, and Richard, you're going to remember this as soon as I say it, is that the chairman was asked to kind of update the governor's office on all our hurricane preparedness. So we shared all the documents that kind of go in, they're referenced in the COOP, but we shared some of those documents on hurricane preparedness. We haven't heard that we need to do any revisions. We kind of, did a walkthrough of that, but that's just an example of something that could happen if we hear back from the governor's emergency management folks. I'm going to call them MEMA, but that's not what they are now. Richard can correct me on their new acronym, but so those are the types of things that might possibly come up in the future. And I guess, what I thought the other question that was kind of coming up in yours and Member Von Paris's is that position title hanging out there in any other policies that we have, board policies, that reference to a deputy. And I don't think it is, but we should probably do another scrub. I mean, just so that I'm, more comfortable that we don't have anything else to come back to, considering we just did this update. So we'll look through that as well as a follow-up.
Thanks, Bruce.
Okay. Thank you, Richard and Bruce. Okay, is there, Bruce, you have another question? Are you good?
No, sir.
Okay.
Just
okay, is there a motion to advance this item to the full board for approval?
So moved, Member Rosen.
Thank you, Member Rosen. Is there a second?
A second, Member Carroll.
Thank you, Member Carroll. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, members. Have a great day.
Yeah. Thank you, Richard, again. Thank you, Bruce, again. Okay, that is the last approval item. Now we will go into item number 3, the progressive design build. And we have, let's see, Jason. Hi, how are you, sir?
Good morning. Very well. Thank you, board members. For the record, my name is Jason Stolikny, and I'm the Highway Discipline Manager at MDTA. Prior to my career at MDTA, I was involved in the Alternative Project Delivery Group at SHA and led multiple alternative delivery projects, programs, and procurements. This presentation will provide a summary of typically used project delivery methods and how they're being leveraged on the Key Bridge rebuild. Moving to slide 2. Before we jump into the discussion about specific project delivery methods, we're going to first touch on the 3 active or upcoming procurements that MDTA is anticipating to support the Key Bridge rebuild. They consist of a progressive design build contract, for which the MDTA has received proposals, and upcoming procurements for general engineering consultant and construction management and inspection services. The PDB will hopefully be the entity that will design and construct the replacement structure. and that GEC and CMI teams will provide the owner support, providing oversight, program support, and review of the progressive design build team's work product and materials and construction effort, respectively. So that PDB is the entity doing that final design and construction, and the GEC and CMI are supporting MDTA's efforts in overseeing the overall project. Just understand that these are active or upcoming procurements, so there are some things that we will be able to answer, and there are some things that we will not be able to answer due to that ongoing activity. Moving on to slide 3, in order to discuss alternative methods, we have to take a step back and briefly discuss the most used delivery approach for government contracts, which is design bid build. DBB, or design bid build, involves the owner or the owner's architect or engineer preparing a complete set of plans, specifications, and estimate. The complete plans are bid out to contractors who are selected on the basis of lowest responsible bid. This provides a straightforward process that is familiar to owners, engineers, and contractors. However, construction cost certainty is not achieved until late in the process, and cost growth during construction is not directly controlled. Moving on to slide 4. In design bid build, the owner has the responsibility of holding 2 separate contracts with the designer record and the contractor, and the owner takes the responsibility of serving as the intermediary between those 2 parties. Through this setup, the owner impliedly warrants the information, plans, and specifications provided to a general contractor, and the contractor is not liable to the owner for the loss of damage which results solely from insufficiencies or defects in the information, plans, and specifications. So essentially, if the contractor does what the plans say, they are not required to ensure that the product performs. They are only required to do what they're told. This can result in a potentially adversarial relationship during construction. The contractor is entitled to seek additional compensation for ambiguity or inconsistencies in the plans, while the designer is held to a standard of care and seeks to minimize their professional liability risk. As a result, the owner is responsible for most cost growth during construction as a result of this setup. Moving to slide 5, construction manager at risk, or CMAR for short, is a contracting method where the owner procures the professional services of a contractor during the design development phase. The contractor is selected through a competitive sealed procurement that typically values technical qualifications over eventual cost. This process allows the contractor to provide constructability input during the design development and gives them the opportunity to influence the design to best suit their construction capabilities, equipment, and crews. In return, the CMAR contractor is accepting the risk for reasonable interpretation discrepancies in the plans. Additionally, the guaranteed maximum price process provides the owner with greater cost certainty for construction and typically provides the contractor with an incentive to minimize design construction expenses. So within this structure, there are 2 separate contracting events where we are bringing on a contractor early in the design phase to run concurrent with preliminary and final design, and then the final cost of the project is agreed to at a later date as the design is further developed. If the contractor and owner are not able to agree to a GMP, the owner has the right to sever the contract with the contractor and to deliver the work under a separate procurement. Moving on to slide 6, the contracting tree for construction manager at risk looks very similar to design bid build, with the additional coordination line between the designer of record and the CMAR contractor. The owner still manages these 2 contracts, and there is still an implied warranty that the plans are complete and accurate. Moving on to slide 7, design build is a method that is somewhat similar to CMAR in that it brings the contractor on prior to final design being complete. The design builder is selected on the basis of a competitive sealed procurement that evaluates team capabilities, project approach, and construction cost. Through this agreement, the design builder is providing final design, permitting, and construction services for a stipulated price. The owner needs to provide significant information, field surveys, subsurface exploration, environmental studies, etc., to proposing teams to allow them to provide responsible bids with reasonable contingencies. So in this structure, in a typical design build, the owner would perform preliminary design, perform a procurement, and then allow that team to perform final design and construction at a cost that was established through that procurement. Moving on to slide 8, the major advantage of design build is that it places the design and construction responsibility with a single entity, typically with a contractor or construction JV as the contract holder and the designer of record as a subcontractor. This places the responsibility for defects or ambiguities in the design solely with the design build entity and limits the owner's exposure to cost growth during the construction phase. Over the past 2 decades, design build has been utilized to deliver some of the largest and most technically complex Department of Transportation projects. However, as the size of mega projects has grown, the contractor appetite for this significant risk transfer has diminished. In the past decade, a modified form of design-build contracting has become more common, combining elements of CMAR and design build called progressive design build. Progressive design build, or PDB, takes the early contractor contribution and delayed establishment of final construction price from CMAR and incorporates it into that traditional design build contractual setup where the designer is working directly for the contractor. Progressive design build provides preliminary design, potentially including design to support a NEPA decision. So they're coming in truly at the very earliest stage of the project, final design, and construction services. By allowing the contractor to be involved throughout the duration of the contract, it allows them to have a much better understanding of the project's risk profile prior to establishing a final cost. So again, similar to CMAR, we have that initial procurement and involvement through professional services early on, and then a delayed establishment of the final construction cost through a guaranteed maximum price. Moving on to slide 10, why would we typically choose progressive design build? Progressive design build procurement is streamlined into one-step procurement, eliminating the need for creating a short list or reduced list of candidates. The initial scope of the work is deliberately broad, allowing the owner and the design build team to collaboratively find cost-effective solutions similar to a planning and engineering contract. We're trying to define the scope of the work, understand how to best achieve the work, and we're working collaboratively with them through that process. The project design benefits from a single designer of record throughout, especially important on highly technical projects. The contractor is allowed to provide input on commercial terms like bonding, insurance, and liability, balancing risk, and optimizing cost. Similar to CMAR, if a mutually agreeable construction price cannot be established, the owner can end the contract with the contractor while maintaining access to that designer of record. In the case of the Key Bridge, the lack of field information and early state of the planning process were primary drivers for the selection of progressive design build. Moving on to slide 11. At this time, a National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, documented categorical exclusion is being prepared with Federal Highway as the lead agency and MDTA in cooperation with SHA as the lead state agency. NEPA is anticipated completed this summer. In addition, Federal Highway and MDTA are working closely with other state and federal permitting agencies to ensure that permits are obtained in order to meet the aggressive rebuild schedule. This procurement will select a highly qualified team through a single-step procurement to provide initial project development services that will determine the project scope and requirements in collaboration with the MDTA. The phase 1 consists of professional services and operates similarly to an open-ended A&E services contract. As it applies to the Key Bridge, phase 1 of the progressive design build would consist of 2 separate subphases, phase 1A and phase 1B. During phase 1A, MDTA and the design builder will establish the overall project scope, project limits, design criteria, and preliminary schedule. develop the opinion of probable cost for the project, and develop work orders that will proceed in phase 1B. Activities that are anticipated to occur within phase 1A include things such as field surveys, data collection, subsurface exploration, public outreach, conceptual development, and engineering. Phase 1B will include work package development, which requires the design builder to advance that proof of concept work product to a level that will enable the design builder and MDTA to develop a guaranteed maximum price, cost, and proposal for the phase 2 work. This work will include detailed engineering, constructability, cost modeling, and detailed plan development. We anticipate seeking the guaranteed maximum price for the Key Bridge at approximately a 50% design completion. And upon successful completion of phase 1, the progressive design builder will have the exclusive negotiated rights for the phase 2 services through the guaranteed maximum price process. If a GMP is not successfully agreed upon, the progressive design builder loses the right to construct the project, and MDTA will deliver the work under a separate contracting mechanism. Moving on to slide 11. Assuming that we can reach an agreeable price, there will not be a separate procurement for phase 2 services. We would modify the contract to add in that additional work. Once the GMP is negotiated, phase 2 of the progressive design build will commence and function similarly to a traditional design build agreement. This effort will involve finalizing the design, developing various work packages, receiving permits, and then constructing the work. The agreement structure will allow for construction to begin prior to the entirety of the design being complete. Separate outreach efforts will occur with construction contractors and disadvantaged business enterprises as work packages are developed, providing additional opportunities to participate in the building of the bridge. And the final slide, thank you very much, board members, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Jason. Member Oettinger? Do you have a question, Member Oettinger?
Yeah, I do.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you for all that information. And you kind of touched on this, but I didn't know if you could give us more of a real world example. I think you said that there were other examples nationally where they've used this type of the PDB approach, and especially as to a project of this size. And then second part of this question is, has the agency itself ever used this approach in any of their projects?
So within the sort of national landscape, this is sort of a contracting mechanism that's become more popular in, say, the last 5 years. So the sample size is largely projects that are within the phase 1 portion of their agreement. And we anticipate progressing more rapidly through that because of the way we are approaching the environmental approvals will allow us to get there. So I don't have any projects of this scale that I can proffer as an example of this is complete and done, but Kentucky and Ohio are currently working on the several $billion-dollar Brent Spence Bridge project, which just received NEPA approval, and they are using progressive design build on that project. And there are several projects in the South, including a couple on I-10 in Mobile, Alabama, that are using progressive design build for similarly sized bridges. Within Maryland, State Highway has had experience utilizing this. They did the I-270 Innovative Congestion Management 8 or 9 years ago now, where, granted, that was a little bit different than the way we're proceeding with the work here, as they treated it a little differently, but they were able to successfully deliver that project within their programmed amount within a reasonable time as far as what their expectations were.
And I'm sorry, Member Von Paris, if I could just follow up. And I understand that these other states are midway or partway through using this approach. I'm assuming, has there been communication with these states to see the good, the bad out of using this approach?
We've been working through some industry organizations that are experts at the design build and progressive design build delivery, but I've not had direct contact, but we can certainly follow up and make sure we're getting those best practices.
Thank you.
I agree with what you just said here. Member Ardinger just expressed her recommendation about getting gleaning as much as we can and learning best practices on other successful projects like this size and the scope of a project like this. I think that's a very good point, and I'm glad that we're going to do that. But overall, we are our procurement policies can align with this project, the way we're going about it, right? With the PDB, I'll say. A little easier to say it that way.
Yes.
Okay. All right. It's a lot of information. I also would like to say that I appreciate those who put this on the agenda. I think it's good to be kind of have the awareness of this, as I guess the Capital Committee has an awareness of this, so we're all on the same page. And in the long run, it'll probably save a lot of questions moving forward with the different committee work that we're doing, and then when it gets eventually to the board. So, but this is very informative, and very much appreciate your presentation. Member Rosen.
I actually do have, I'm sorry, I just have one question related to, yeah, so it sounds like the construction manager who's leading this is, of course, they're going to bid out the various elements, so we'll feel confident that we're getting a good price for different elements. How is the construction manager, or the general contractors who's overseeing this, who we select, how are they compensated for this so that our interests are aligned, versus if it was some type of percentage basis where in effect they would make more if the costs were more?
So as part of the technical proposals, we are soliciting anticipated markups for both the phase 1 portion of the work and the phase 2 portion of work. And those markups cover a portion of the prime contractor or JV's services during those phases. And if they choose to self-perform work, they're obviously compensated at cost for that, or at the agreed upon way we are going to execute that work. So there is a component of sort of the carrying cost or cost of doing business for the contractors that is incorporated into that initial selection. And those numbers are carried through the ultimate contract execution.
Okay. And in other similar type of projects, granted it's a fairly new type of contract, from an industry perspective, it's believed that the cost to the general contractor are reasonable, and that the sponsor is getting a fair price versus if you went to market in a different way.
Yeah, and there's a comprehensive process where we're going to be preparing like-to-like estimates to ensure that our opinion of what the cost is similar to what the contractor or Progressive Design Builder's opinion of that cost is, so that we are coming towards a mutual understanding of the project cost. And that's where that ability to sever the contractual agreement comes into place in the event that there is wide discrepancies between the two opinions of the cost.
Great, thank you.
Oh, Bruce, did you have, I'm sorry.
No, that's good. I just wanted to reinforce a couple things in response to your question about, where has this been used and what we've been doing to look into how can we do this best. So Jim and I participated in a panel with the Contractors Association, while the procurement, or right before the procurement went out, I believe. And there are a number of examples in Washington State where they've used it not necessarily on transportation projects. So this started more in the vertical world. So there have been experts available to us that the team has been looking into, and also wanted to reinforce something Jason said, and that's the experience that engineering has gotten in the CMAR oversight process. It's very similar in terms of the pricing and the guaranteed maximum price and how that is bid out. It's just where the risk is placed. and who controls the designer. So I think that CMAR experience has been very good for this group, and I think it's a strength that we've shown. And then final point, the one project that Jason referenced that State Highway had done was actually something that my consulting company was a sub-consultant on that won that contract. And I think the the interesting part about that process, again, it was a 0% design. So basically State Highway said on the 270 corridor, teams come up with different ideas and your innovation and submit that. So there's a lot of ability to have that in this process. And another benefit of that, there was an element of that project on 270 where Montgomery County was a little concerned about a ramp metering project, and that basically stayed out there for a while until that it could be resolved. So it gave the owner some flexibility on that, and the construction and the design team were kind of like, okay, we'll wait for it and get compensated when we can. Final point on that, and just agreeing with what Jason said, the view into the financials. So I know our general contractor had to do a lot of work, and we had to provide a lot of pricing justification in that 270 process. So the agents, SHA was very aware of the costs that they were paying for the items that were bid. So just wanted to offer my perspective on that experience with Progressive Design Build.
Thanks, Bruce. Thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Jason. Very good presentation and very detailed. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, board members.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the last item on the agenda, number 4. Item number 4 is an update for the Francis Scott Key Bridge Turnaround. And Chantel is here to provide that update. Good morning, Chantel.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could cue this up for Chantel and let her take it. She's been, putting the details together at my request. But so that the FSK turnaround is that, exit 44 movement that really helps to keep the commercial motor vehicle traffic moving between the port and the other points to the northeast. And Chantel's going to go into kind of the history of what we've done there, but I'll just say I wanted to make sure you all had a briefing on this because the chairman is encouraged us to really think about having this movement free for the duration of the closure of the Key Bridge and not collect tolls. We've been doing that, as Chantel will get into, kind of on this ad hoc basement, and we've been monitoring traffic. So I just appreciate your time on this, and the intent is to give you some background now, get some questions, and that we come back to you at a future meeting to kind of present an approval item for continuing potentially that non-tolled movement on the Key Bridge exit there. So I'll let Chantel, and then we'll both be available for questions.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. As Bruce mentioned, today I'll be providing the committee with a brief update on the status of tolling at the FSK Bridge Turnaround. Before doing so, I'd like to direct your attention to the key takeaways on the first page of your memo. While this is an update item, the authority staff does intend to seek approval from the board next month to continue the temporary suspension of the collection of tolls at the turnaround until the new bridge is completed. The continued suspension of tolling at the turnaround until the new bridge is ready allows for the efficient use and management of traffic on other portions of the authority's facilities. The most recent traffic and revenue update that was discussed last month assumes that the authority will forego tolling the collection of tolls at the turnaround until the new bridge opens in the fall. Therefore, the authority's financial metrics as presented in the June financial forecast that you all approved are not further impacted by this proposed action. Prior to the bridge collapse, as Bruce mentioned, vehicles on the inner loop of 695 requiring access to the Browning Highway used the FSK Bridge Turnaround. Before the collapse, the bridge turnaround averaged about 100,000 transactions and about $1 million annually in revenue. Since the turnaround reopened, there have been approximately 20,000 turnaround movements. And as of late, in June, on average, the turnaround movements are very similar to the turnaround movements in 2023 prior to the collapse. The authority has not tolled the turnaround movement since the bridge collapse. And although the authority's trust agreement prohibits free passage, the trust agreement contains a limited exception that allows a temporary suspension of tolling for the efficient use and management of traffic on other transportation facility project roadways in the event of catastrophic situations such as this. As previously mentioned, the authority is planning on seeking the board's approval to continue this until the new bridge is completed. Currently, the authority is preparing to put up signs advising motorists of the temporary suspension of tolls. So that's essentially the update, but before concluding my remarks, I'd like to kind of pause here to see if Bruce has anything additional he'd like to add, or perhaps Richard or Deb.
Nothing more from me.
Okay. My question is there, outside of this, is there a longer term solution for this problem in the works to kind of deal with this? It just always seems to be an issue. It's been going on for a long time. I mean, not so much this particular, what we're talking about today, but the whole turnaround situation where should that be, I don't know, a county issue rather than.
So I think you're aware Chantel's prepared joint chairman's reports to the legislature. I think that's what you're referring to, asking about different discount programs and what can be done here for commercial vehicles. I think it's something that you all have to consider as a board in looking at the finances and looking at the impact of the federal funds on the cost of the bridge, and what our local share or match of that will be. So we'll factor all those things into the longer term of whether there could be a way to modify the tolling so it's not as impactful for the private sector, but we also have to look at how that balances up against our financials, and especially when we get to FY 28, 29. So I don't have an answer for you right now, but obviously we've got a lot of capital expenditures on the non-bridge part of the FSK. I think there's 137 million or something in the 6-year program for that portion of 6095 that doesn't include the bridge, including the Bear Creek. So there's a rationale to have some tolling there. We just have to think about it in terms of the overall structure and our discount programs.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from any members? Member Rosen, do you have any questions?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you, Chantel and Bruce, for the time to explain this in greater detail. Thank you very much. So, okay, well, that is the last item on the agenda today. So I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
Member Ardinger also move.
Second, that's Member Carroll.
Okay, motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We stand adjourned. Thank you very